It was autumn in 2015. I was 23 years old. I am now 31. During that time, I lived in Lancaster as I was studying at Lancaster University. For those who may not be familiar, Lancaster is a small and rather quaint town in the north of England. As a student, you can either live at the university campus or in private accommodation in the town. I had decided to live in a newly built, renovated apartment in a nice side of town, and yes, it was expensive. I had already been studying for 2 years and had reached my third year. By this time, I had grown accustomed to the layout of the town and felt comfortable and safe living there semi-independently with 2 other friends who were also studying at the university. Since my first year, I had decided to improve my fitness by taking nightly runs around either the campus or the town. As we were living in the town center by my third year, I would run either with my housemate or alone. The important thing to note about Lancaster, and this will be important later, is that it has quite a large residential area that is hilly and far removed from the bustling center, which at that time was a hub for the students or the local northern folk, probably drinking in pubs or eating pies. Occasionally, I would run with my housemate. However, I prefer to run alone and listen to some kind of heavy metal. A big fan of Deftones during that period. On this particular day, as I said, a chilly autumnal evening, I had decided to run alone. It was about 8 p.m. and I had my earphones in. I had started to run up to the more isolated district that led me to a pretty residential area and a large green called Willison Park. It had a butterfly museum at the top of a hill. Next to the park was a very large graveyard, the kind that is miles wide and has different areas. Large yew trees, crumbling graves, a crypt in the center overrun with leaves and ivy. What was especially creepy about this particular cemetery was that it had the ruin of an old mental asylum or hospital at the other side. You can actually sneak in if you walked across the width of the cemetery and crawled through a small hole in the fence that led to the asylum grounds. This was not advised though, as guard dogs roamed the derelict building. It was not a place you wanted to be during the night. So I had made my way past Willison Park and up to the entrance of the graveyard. Immediately, my eye was drawn to something small standing at the imposing gates of the graveyard. They were kind of tall, black iron gates that were at the bottom of a little winding path. I felt a little apprehensive, but it wasn't unusual to see people walking their dogs out of the graveyard, so I started to slow my pace to a walk in the direction of the shape. As I drew nearer, I realized that the shape was a child around 9 to 10 years old, and they were running towards me frantically. They looked panicked and scared. I think they were crying. I vividly remember that the girl was not wearing a coat, only a thin dress that would not be suitable for the harsh Lancastrian autumn. She asked me if I could help her. She was desperate and seemed to be frightened of something. She kept looking back into the graveyard, which at this point was totally pitch black beyond the gates. I mean, there was absolutely no light beyond the path. As the graveyard was quite large, it was chilling to see the depth of the blackness and the vulnerable child standing at the mouth of the gate helpless. I don't recall what the girl said exactly, but I then offered to call the local police. I had typed 911 into my phone and had it on loudspeaker. The girl immediately changed. She was not happy about the fact I was calling the police, that was clear. She stopped crying and she seemed angry, almost demanding, and insisted that she did not need the police to help. I reassured her that it was the best to inform the police. I even offered to walk her to the station, which is about 20 minutes back down the hill. The girl turned and ran back into the graveyard. She ran directly through the gates into the eerie blackness. She didn't turn back, just ran as quickly as possible until she had completely disappeared. It was then totally silent. I was spooked beyond belief, now standing in a darkened street completely alone. I had so many questions. Who was the girl? Why was she alone? Why was she scared of the police? Why wasn't she frightened of the dark? Who might she be running to or from? I turned and ran all the way back down the hill, not stopping until I had reached a well-lit, built-up area. Safe to say, I didn't run on my own at night again. I met Leo during my junior year of high school. Leo was an immigrant from Guatemala and was new to my school. We had many classes together, but we both enjoyed core a lot. One day, we were coming back from a core trip. I mustered up the courage to sit with him on the bus and begin a conversation. He charmed me immediately. We talked for 3 hours and enjoyed the time so much. He gave me a cute origami boat with his number and Snapchat on it, and I had fallen hard. We spent the next 10 days messaging and snapping every single day. We sat next to each other in every class and started eating lunch in the library together. I began to notice a few red flags that I chose to ignore because I thought I was being crazy. The first was that anytime I invited him to an activity or hangout outside of school, he would blatantly refuse. There was never any excuse or reason. The answer was simply no. I invited him to several things, even some with my family, and he would never even consider it. The next red flag started when he would ask me questions but never allow me to answer them. He'd ask a question, and right as I'd begin to respond, he would interrupt it with a much more personal question. Example: "What are you doing today?" "Oh, I'm going to. How many boyfriends have you had?" It was really strange. On day 10, I was walking my dog, and I got a strange message from him. "I had a dream, and I want to tell you about it." At first I was thrilled and was curious. But then when he started sending a bunch of messages through, I got really sick. The dreams he had were a bunch of very descriptive sexual fantasies about me. All of them were sickening and objectified my body in ways that no one would be comfortable. He started telling me the types of nude photos he wanted to take of me and the things he wanted me to be doing to myself in them. It wasn't sexy, it was scary. Then he told me how he wanted to meet up in secret several times a week that nobody would know. That's when I responded, "No, please never talk to me again." I blocked him on everything. I called my friend who had him on Snapchat as well, and she frantically told me that he was adding photos to his story. All of them were pornographic photos of girls that looked a lot like me. They had the same body shape, hair color, skin tone, etc. He did this for 2 months until he graduated and announced to the class that he would be moving to California. Throughout those 2 months, he would constantly try to talk to me at school the way he first did when we were harmlessly flirting. But I shut it down and told him to go away. I thought I was in the clear, but that was not the case. All summer, I would get messages from random numbers. "You look pretty in that pink shirt. What did you order?" "I ordered the burger." "It's a nice day for the fair, right?" Anytime I went out with friends, he was there. I would never see him, but he would message me something so that I would know he was there. All of the numbers were burner phones. At the same time, he was posting photos on his Instagram of being in California. His new life there and how he was getting a new job, house, etc. None of the pictures had his face in them though. I deleted all my socials. I changed my number. Eventually, after I graduated, my family moved to a new town and I followed. He clearly no longer knew where I was, but I would still get messages, emails, fake profiles of him trying to stalk my friends and family. It continued for 3 more years until one day, He just stopped. I've never heard from him again. Eventually, I got my socials back, but made everything private. I am now married and killing it at my job, but I will never forget this awful experience. Every few years it resurfaces and plays through my mind on repeat for months. So I'm new to this city for a concert I'm gonna see. It's my first time traveling alone, so I feel like the safest spot for me is to just relax and read some manga in the city library, while I wait for my hotel check-in time to come. Well, I guess I picked a bad spot to read at because people kept trying to talk with me. Which is fine, but I'm too shy to just tell them to go away. One person sat at a table across from me and asked me where I'm from and who I came with. Obviously I lied, even though I assumed this person was an older lady. They were wearing a hat and thick coats, so I couldn't really tell. I was nicer to them than I should have been, since I assumed this older lady was the chatty type, you know. She says I look young and have nice hair and stuffs, and asks if I'm from around here. Well, turns out they're not a lady. As I got a closer look at them, as he came closer and he comes to sit next to me. He asked me for my number, and stupidly, I did give him my actual number. He wrote his down and his name and asked me to write my name too. I put a fake name. Then he gives me his phone to put in the info and compares the written to the one I put in his phone. I can't bring myself to refuse since none of the librarians were looking our way and he was very big, so I didn't want to make him mad or something. Then he turns to leave and asks when he can call me, and I'm like, oh, just whenever, haha. Obviously I blocked him when he tried to call later, so I hope he assumes my number was fake too. But as he left, he asked if I had a Facebook and I said no, and then he asked to take a photo of me. He's like, can I take some pictures of you if you don't have a Facebook? And I nervously laughed like, no. Honestly, what? Anyway, I don't think I'll visit a big city library again. When I was about 12 or 13, I used to play a lot of video games with my best friend, and we often played shooters together. As you can imagine, it's easy to get frustrated, and at one point, I ended up breaking my PlayStation controller. Since I didn't have a spare and couldn't continue playing, I told my friend that I had to stop. He said I could come over and borrow his second controller since he didn't live far away, just a short walk. I thought okay and told him I'd be over soon. So I grabbed my keys and started walking to his house. It was already dark, and since it was winter, it was snowy and very foggy. While walking, I had a strange feeling like I was being watched. I kept looking around but didn't see anyone. When I arrived at his place and picked up the controller, I saw through a window that a man was standing in the middle of the street. I pointed it out to my friend, and we both wondered who or what was standing there. It looked like a person, but we couldn't make out any details, just a silhouette. Eventually, we decided to go outside and see if the person needed help or if something was wrong. We stepped out and asked what was going on, but there was no response. The person just stared at us and then walked away. We were both confused and told his parents, but they just brushed it off, thinking we were imagining things because we played too many video games. After a while, I figured it was time to head home. Since we had played video games together for a while, I almost forgot about the strange encounter. But when I was walking back, I started to feel that same eerie sensation of being watched. I saw a few passerby, but they all seemed normal, nothing strange. But just before I got home, I looked behind me one last time and I saw that person again, this time standing behind a tree staring at me. Then they started walking toward me and eventually they began running. I could tell it was an older man, probably around 60, but I was surprised how fast he was running. He was shouting something in a language I didn't understand, but he didn't seem happy. I ran for my life, clutching my keys and tried to unlock my front door as fast as possible. When I got inside, I quickly glanced back, but the man was gone. I rushed to my room and immediately told my friend about what had just happened. He suggested I call the police, which I did, but since my description wasn't very detailed, the police took a report but didn't seem to take it too seriously. My parents were visibly shocked, but nothing ever came of it. In my village, 4 other people reported similar experiences, saying that someone was watching or following them. I was one of them, but no one was ever caught by the police. To this day, no one knows who this man is, whether he's just trying to scare people, or if it's something more sinister. No one knows for sure, but everyone agrees that it seems to be a man around 60 years old. Beyond that, no one can give a detailed description. That day I feared for my life. I've told many of my friends about this, and I've received mixed reactions. Some said it sounds like a spooky campfire story, while others believed me and were visibly scared. A few even told me they had experienced the exact same thing.